and continued prayer. It also had me thinking about when you think about the deaths that we did experience due to 9/11, when you think about the deaths that we've experienced due to this pandemic, it's almost the same number every week. So the same level of people who died in 9/11 every week have died due to this pandemic in our country. I also want to send love and empathy and prayers and support in every way imaginable to our brothers and sisters on the West Coast. We know California and Oregon and Washington are suffering very deeply. I do believe in climate change. I have seen just the amount of disasters throughout our country that are connected, whether or not we believe it or not. But it's something that we will have to continue to address and take very seriously during our time. And so the City of New Orleans will remain focused on our climate action plan, implementing it fully, as well as wanting to reduce the carbon emissions and footprint in our city by 50%, with that date being 2030, less than 10 years from now. Our actions today will ultimately dictate where we are in the future. And you've been hearing that a lot as I talk about the pandemic. But this is about our livelihood, our lives, our quality of life in our city, in our state, and in our country. This weekend, Saints back in the Dome, and we're very excited about that. However, being excited, we love our Saints, yes we do. But like many things, COVID is forcing us to do some things differently in how we celebrate, and cheer on our Saints is now a part of it. So tailgating on city property will not be tolerated, will not be permitted this weekend. No neutral grounds, underpasses, or any other public spaces for tailgating. Large gatherings are limited to the Phase 2 guidelines that we have been under for months now. We cannot let our guards down. This is not the time. This is the time to continue to be vigilant, do what is necessary, practice civic responsibility, and to move us through the impacts of this pandemic. Do not put others at risk as it relates to large gatherings and these events that can turn into super spreaders in our community. On September the 27th, the Saints will be here once again with their home game right here in the Dome. We're excited about that as well. However, fans will not be allowed to attend during that time either. We cannot allow 20,000 people in a crowd to gather at all, and that would be dangerous, irresponsible, and definitely not aligned with the Phase 2 guidelines in the city of New Orleans. As it relates to Tulane football, this was something that was asked of us on yesterday, and we did receive and review Tulane's COVID mitigation plans for their football program. They have presented a robust plan, well-resourced approach for identifying and mitigating risks, as they have demonstrated with their student body population, with the kids returning, or students returning back to campus and on site. Tulane has been a partner embedded in my advisory panel in terms of reopening the city, and one that has been transparent every step of the way and is tied to our priority of getting all of our young people back into the classroom, from college, university level, and again to primary grades, particularly around our public schools. So we'll continue on that path. Bottom line, Tulane can proceed because we've reviewed, we've received, we've reviewed, and have approved the mitigation plans in place. Dr. Vegno can go into much more detail about that if she chooses to do so. At this time, I'm going to ask my Superintendent of Police, Sean Ferguson, to come forward and to give you an update from his perspective and what we can anticipate over the weekend. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your steadfast leadership through these extraordinary times. Good morning, everyone. Let me start by saying the only way we as a community can continuously to meet these challenges that are presented to us because of COVID-19 is to be responsible and not let our temptations get the best of us. That is what occurred last weekend, Labor Day weekend. We allowed our temptations to get the best of us. And there were large gatherings all over the city that should not have been. And I can tell you today, we are committed to address those large gatherings. Unfortunately, having a good time the way that we are used to having a good time has a terrible price that can possibly be paid. And we will not know the price that would be paid for last weekend for maybe another week or so. But the current health climate will only improve if we stay the course. So when the Saints play this Sunday, please, please, please do not go downtown to tailgate. Fans are not allowed in the Superdome for the game, and for the same reason, for that very same reason, we will not permit or allow tailgating on any public property throughout this weekend. We must stop this spread of COVID-19. If you plan to watch the game on private property, remember to follow the rules and guidelines of Phase 2. Continue to wear your mask. Continue to practice social distancing. Something else we will continue to monitor throughout this weekend is the pop-up second lines. We had that last weekend. We had that weekend before. And I'm here to tell you now I have given specific instructions to my field operations chief as well as my district captains to engage. This will be no different than what we've done in past months. We will identify the leaders or informal leaders and ask you to comply with the Phase 2 guidelines. In the health climate we're in, these second lines are very dangerous, not just for the people at risk of contracting COVID-19, but for the unsuspecting people that you may be taking it home to, your mothers, your grandmothers, fathers, grandfathers, aunts and uncles, whomever in your family who may be a part of that vulnerable population. This is not just about you. This is not just about me. It is about the people that we are meeting and putting at risk after possibly being exposed to this virus. Our officers will engage individuals who are violating Phase 2 guidelines. We will issue a summons when necessary, and if you continue to disregard or not comply, you may face arrest. You very well will face arrest. For the restaurants, we will continue to work with our partners at Code Enforcement to monitor the crowds and your sizes within your businesses. We know you are tired. We know our citizens want to get back to some sort of normalcy, especially now that it's football season, including myself, favorite time of the year. But we need to last a little while longer to prevent the spread of this virus. If you want to report any gatherings, please call 311. Any gathering reports should be reported through 311, not 911 that would tie up our lines for emergency calls. Please call 311. So again, help us to help our city to get through this pandemic together safely. Again, no tailgating and no second lines, not yet. Give us a little time. We can all get back to what we love to do here in New Orleans. Thank you.
Thank you,
Ma'am?
Chief. Dr. Vegno?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Chief. Good morning, everybody. I just would like to provide the health data background for what both the mayor and the chief said and what Winston will say. This week is 6 months since our first local case of the coronavirus. It feels like a lot longer. We were as prepared as anybody could have been at the time, but nobody could have predicted where we would be 6 weeks later in a very, very different place. We know a lot more than we did 6 months ago, but we have to be honest, there are many uncertainties about now and about our future. And again, just to reiterate what's been said, what is constant is the resilience, the determination, and the commitment for the vast majority of our residents to getting through this. It's the only way I think that we've gotten through much better than other places. Yesterday, you were there, most of you, when we stood alongside Orleans Public Schools as they announced return to in-person learning will continue and start on Monday. Again, this is our top priority. There is no greater benefit right now for public health and the economy than to safely support the return of our youngest and hopefully our older learners back in school. And so that's why, with that priority in mind, I'm asking you, again, with everyone else, to take extra care as the Saint season starts on Sunday. So in our phase 2 regulations, we have allowed a maximum of 250 people to attend a timed seated event, like a church service or a movie theater. To date, we have not had any outbreaks in Orleans Parish that have been related to these kinds of activities. There is absolutely no indication that if we were to allow 100 times that number of people into a confined space with singing and shouting and yelling, that would be safe right now. And I don't think you're going to find a public health official in this country who would disagree with that. Again, for this reason, we're not going to have an audience at this home game and at the next home game. And for the same reason, because crowds are a clear risk of super spreader events, we are not allowing tailgating. Our limits on indoor and outdoor gatherings still apply. That's 25 individuals for indoor, 50 for outdoor, again with masks and social distancing. And that's public, private gatherings. And then, of course, the restaurants are at 50% with 6 feet apart. We keep saying these regulations, but I think it's important just to hear them again so we don't let our guard down. Uncontrolled large gatherings, whether it is a conference in Boston or a wedding in Maine or a soccer match in March in the UK, all of these have been super spreader events that have caused significant illness and death. And we have come a long way since March, but we have still lost almost 600 people to this disease. And we've had over 12,000 known cases and continue to see hospitalizations and death. I love football. Anybody that knows me knows that I am a huge NFL and college football fan. But I'm asking fellow fans not to let your love of football trump what's truly important, your family members who could fall ill if you were to get COVID at a party. It's just not worth it. To expound on what the mayor said about Tulane, since we got that question yesterday, and it's important that as things change, we want to make sure we're informed and you're informed. As the mayor said, Tulane is able to provide, not unlike the NFL, an incredibly robust testing, tracing, isolation, and quarantine protocols, not just for their athletes, but for their entire campus. These are resources that are largely not available to the rest of us or to the rest of our institutions. In addition to their protocols for the general campus, we have reviewed their safety measures, their health guidelines from every part of how their athletes plan to play their games. They've been devised by the NCAA, Tulane's conference, and medical staff. There always will be a risk, and a significant one, in contact sports. However, if we are choosing as a society to accept football, then we need to mitigate that risk as much as possible. And reviewing these and understanding them and speaking with their physicians and staff, we do believe that they provide a level of mitigation that we can support. Furthermore, in terms of spectators in stands, Tulane will abide by the 50% max of 250 people in Uland Stadium. Again, this is consistent with what we are saying for our timed seated events. They will also be masking and social distancing for those 250 folks that are going to be in the stadium. And we're going to work with them to assess any cases that occur around games that we know that they will be isolated and investigated to prevent further harm. So this all leads up to high school football, right? Which is what we get asked about, and I know you're going to ask about it. This is the level of thought and careful attention to the health and safety of young people and coaches that we are looking for. And we are looking and developing that guidance. We are working with our high school football representatives in partnership to figure out what that looks like. We are going to meet with them on Monday, as you heard yesterday. We are awaiting the final guidance from LHSAA to see what they are proposing. And then again, how can we make it as safe as possible? Because that is really the most important thing. If we start from there, then our hope is that we can develop a plan that everyone can feel good about, but more importantly, not cause any unnecessarily illnesses or deaths. That is what's going to drive any plan or protocol that we collectively develop. So, again, to get back to the gathering sizes and the restrictions on spectators, we have to be clear and consistent in this. So for any allowed sporting event, we are considering, because it is a timed, seated event, to be similar to the restrictions that we have in place on churches and movie theaters. Just as we are not allowing large, uncontrolled crowds of people to tailgate or go to a bar, we would not allow that at an event. So I hope that everyone can understand that we are trying to be consistent and as safe as we possibly can be while enjoying the recreation that we love. I recognize with everybody up here the sacrifices that all of us have made. This has changed every aspect of our lives for many of us. Live music, football games, parades, house parties are part of the fabric of this city, and I miss them just as much as you do. But we are resilient, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can celebrate the Saints and enjoy what we love creatively and without putting others in harm's way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Avegno, very much. And we'll hear from our Director of Code Enforcement, Mr. Winston Reed. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, team, for your leadership. I want to emphasize, as we all know, that we do have a mask mandate. So if you are in town, out of town, if you're walking down Bourbon Street, standing outside of a hotel, waiting in line to go into a restaurant, you need to make sure you're properly social distancing yourself and you have your mask on. It is a mask mandate. A word to individuals that may promote large social gatherings, such as unpermitted activities in the quarter, DJs, boombox carrying, individuals who, again, that may entice such activity. We will properly and aggressively and swiftly enforce that. We cannot allow these events that we have, as much as we enjoy our French Quarter, as much as we enjoy this weekend coming for the Saints, because again, we are all excited that football is back. But again, we must stay the course. We must be responsible to yourself and responsible to your neighbor and definitely responsible to your family. Because again, as the chief said, there's a price to pay, and we've yet to identify what those numbers and results may be 2 weeks from now. To our restaurant vendors and businesses throughout the city, we want you to pay very close attention to your threshold, your occupancy threshold levels. Remember, you are acting as and classified as a restaurant right now. Do not act or operate as a bar. You should be aware of the COVID guidelines as it relates to how to operate as a bar. Your food service levels also has a certain threshold. So without me getting into that, you know what it is. We will be out, we will be looking at that, and then if you, to violate that, you will possibly be audited by the ATC, Alcohol Tobacco Control Agency, and the Fire Marshal's Office as well. We also want you to pay close attention to, we want you to take advantage of the access of the sidewalks, but we don't want you to exceed it to the point where you're creating obstructions of the sidewalk or the street area. That means do not put chairs or tents in the street. You're basically, at that point, creating and constituting, if you will, a block party. So we don't want anyone to put anyone in harm's way. We want you, again, to exercise the right that we've expanded the allowability to have access to the sidewalks. But again, we must take care of our patrons and be cognizant of vehicles coming down the street that may harm people. Party buses. As much as we have emphasized, Mayor, that party buses are allowed, we know that there are individuals out there that are still operating as a party bus. You cannot circumvent the process by hiring a limousine and be shuttled around the city in large groups. Again, you're basically operating and acting as a party bus. So again, we're going to be paying very close attention to that as well. As the chief emphasized and talked about, we're going to be paying very close attention to our large gatherings under the bridges, second lines, tailgating. We ask that you, again, partner with us. This is a time to be a good neighbor. Help us come together, work with us as we move closer to a point where we can transition to another phase. To individuals, business owners that may feel that they want to, on a temporary basis, open up their bar. Bars are not allowable within the phase 2. It's very important that you know that we will aggressively enforce the laws against you, which means that you may have your license permanently revoked. We don't want to do that. We are willing to work with you, but again, we cannot allow for individuals to think that they can open up a bar on a temporary basis in a makeshift-like way, thinking that you're just having friends over, you're selling drinks. You can't do that, okay? We appreciate your support. We appreciate you working with us, and as I've always said, we cannot get where we need to be without you. We appreciate the leadership here, but we also appreciate your leadership at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winston Reed. Well, thank you all again for being here with us this morning as we provided you with some level of updates around this weekend, around enforcement, and of course the impacts of COVID-19. Ms. LaToya, are there any questions? I know that we can take.
Mayor, the Jefferson Parish Council authored a resolution that allows high schools in Orleans to use the parks and playgrounds to practice and play contact sports. Do you think that undermines your decision for right now to stay in phase 2?
Well, we know what will be allowed in the city of New Orleans at this time. We have put together a task force committee to thoroughly review plans and work with all stakeholders to determine where the city of New Orleans will end up, prior to the start of game day for high schools. I don't see it as undermining me at all. What will be for New Orleans is what will be for New Orleans. And if others who don't want to follow those guidelines go outside the parish, well, then they will be accountable and responsible for the outcomes that come with the decision that was made. I will stay focused and do what I know is the right thing to do for Orleans Parish.
WWL?
Mayor, there's been a lot of talk of the economy and health. Many people are saying that they're at a tipping point, especially the bars and the restaurants. Can you clearly explain to them the rationale of why the city of New Orleans needs to stay in phase 2 at this point while the state is moving on to phase 3?
Sure. Well, our economy is definitely hit hard at every level, and not just the city of New Orleans or the state of Louisiana. It is the entire country. And it's all due to the impacts of COVID-19 at no fault of anyone in terms of the business owners, but there is some fault at the federal level. At the end of the day, the resources that are needed to make all of our business owners whole, and they should be made whole, rests really at the feet of the federal government. And I am more than committed to advocating for fighting for, and doing everything that's necessary to ensure that all of our businesses are made whole. But for the city of New Orleans, and under my authority to get us to where we need to be, meaning our economy opened up, it does start with all of our children being back into the classroom. That has an economic impact far greater. And the issue is not only just getting them in the classroom, it's keeping them there, wanting them to remain on site throughout this school year. That will, without doubt, open up our economy in ways that we will be prepared when that happens. Hopefully, even by that time, resources would have been made more available to our business owners so that they will be at a place where they can open up when that time comes. But right now, the priority, again, is getting kids back into the classroom because there's a ripple effect to that. Not only the academic achievement of our young people, which is essential, understanding that we entered into this pandemic at a deficit academically. Not only that, the mental health and trauma, the social, emotional, behavioral impact of this on our young people is significant, and on our families. The ability for our parents and guardians to understand and know that their children are in a safe place and learning while they're then free to go to work and earn the living that they deserve. In addition to that, it's having an impact on violence and crime throughout the city with our young people not being in school. Because we do have some families in our city that are not caring for their children at a level that they should. And so we have multiple, and I can go on and on about why it is not only important for our children, but it's also important to our economy if we put our children first. And we, again, entered this pandemic at a deficit with our children, and even as it relates to health and health disparities and gaps within our community that we cannot overlook. But if we do overlook, we will put our city and our people so far behind than we were when we started. And we cannot afford for that to happen. Our economy will bounce back if we continue to do the right thing by putting children first. I have no doubt in my mind about that. And so, the biggest bucket of resources available to any citizen, any resident, is going to come from the federal government, and we will be relentless in our action and in our advocacy to get our people what they need. Looking for a federal response at a local level makes no sense at all. But we will be steadfast in our approach, stick to the data and the science, and move forward in a way that will keep us on the path to being a healthy community. Right now, we're on that path, and I want us to remain there. And we'll get there in full complement if we continue, again, to stay focused and do not be distracted and even get weary in well-doing.
The mayor alluded to this in her comments, but I also wanted to speak to the chief about the crime we're seeing now. We're not at a murder rate that's higher this year than it was in all of last year.
Absolutely, every city in this, absolutely, absolutely, and absolutely. So, Chief, you want to speak to some of the things we're doing?
I'm going to ask you, what's the question?
What can you attribute to some of those increases that we're seeing to?
Excuse me. Let me start by saying this. 2020 has been a highly unusual year for all of us. You see a spike, an increase in violent crime across the country, but specifically here in New Orleans, what we are seeing, normally we would see our homicides and motives are either feuds, neighborhood feuds, or narcotics. This year, you're seeing road rages that are ending in homicides. You're seeing mental illness, domestic violence. So there are a litany of things. There are a litany of reasons as to what could be the triggers behind this recent spike in homicides. I cannot put it all in one bucket. I just cannot do that at this time. But what I can say, and I commend the men and women of the New Orleans Police Department, they have been proactive in engaging these individuals. Canal Street, Canal and St. Charles, an apprehension was made immediately after. last night, 2 apprehensions with individuals still armed in our triple homicide last night. So we remain dedicated and committed to what it is that we have been sworn to do, and we will continue to do just that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chief.
This is maybe a question for you, Mayor, or maybe Dr. Avegno. Yesterday, you mentioned a workplace exception that the Saints have to seek from the state to play football. If you could explain exactly what that is, and will they get that, and do you support that?
Okay.
Yeah. And that might be the wrong way to say it, Travis. My understanding from the state is that they had argued that because what they do is business, right? They are professional football players. They are paid, so they are being treated like a business, like a law firm or a restaurant. When you're talking about college and K through 12, nobody's getting paid. That's a very, very different issue, particularly if you're talking about children who are not minors. So again, professional sports being a business is going to be allowed to proceed because the NFL, probably more than any other entity on this planet, has the resources to throw the best care, testing, tracing, isolation to mitigate the risk to those work, just as your workplace does what it can do to make sure that you're safe.
Do you think other businesses could or should apply, or can they?
I'm not really sure there's an application, and I didn't mean to misspoke or have it get in there. I don't know that there's an application. Businesses are adhering to health and safety protocols, and so it would seem that if the Saints are a business, they are adhering to health and safety protocols as well.
Madam Mayor, yesterday you talked about the possibility of removing government benefits from people who are caught violating the restrictions. I was wondering if you could provide more details on that. How would the city be able to restrict benefits that are given by the state or the federal government?
Yeah, we're working through it right now, actually trying to determine what our jurisdiction, really we know what our jurisdiction is or our levels of authority, but if there is an opportunity for partnership so that we can mitigate any further risk associated with the pandemic. So we're still looking at that. It was just some thought that I'm given to ways, again, to hold people accountable for their actions, knowing that they're violating guidelines that are put in place by this city. And even as it relates to guidelines put in place by the state of Louisiana, as it relates to those large gatherings.
Does that mean that you're going to be asking the governor or the legislature for some changes there? And doesn't that
Possibly.
Doesn't that hurt the people who are most vulnerable because of this pandemic and are needing?
Possibly. There's a way that you have to look through every aspect before making a decision of whether or not you're going to fully implement it or not. However, there are individuals that are vulnerable who are violating guidelines that are in place, and that has been proven as well. So the bottom line is it's civic responsibility. This will not be necessary if people just do the right thing. And so, but we're looking at every aspect, every angle, when you knowingly and intentionally violate state and local guidelines and yet receive government benefits. So it's something that I am looking at, absolutely, in other ways as well. Okay, thank you all again so much. And Travers, you have my Twitter feed, and I've been on more memes and TikToks, and man, I don't know what. But
Social media is important.
I'm telling you, thank you so much.